I'm Rob O'Neill, Head of Analytics at University Hospitals of Morecambe Bay NHS Foundation Trust. And I'm going to talk to you about my experience of using cloud data, analytics, and AI to accelerate organisational transformation and value. And I'm going to do so within the context of healthcare, a sector where I've worked in a variety of data-related roles for almost the past 20 years. Coronavirus has affected everyone around the globe, and it could be that you have family or friends who've died as a result of contracting the virus, or perhaps you yourself have been ill, or know people who have been, or have family and friends who've lost their jobs or have been affected by mental health issues that have manifested through the past 18 months, where there's been long periods where human-to-human contact has been severely limited. As the world continues to battle with raging coronavirus, but other parts start to rebuild economies and look to introduce, to some extent, societal norms, there's an area of healthcare which isn't immediately obvious, but will undoubtedly affect every one of us in some way. And that's healthcare that's associated not with the immediacy of the pandemic, but with the growing backlog of patients who are waiting to be treated, who are waiting for a procedure or an operation. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be that a patient was waiting for treatment or expecting treatment, leading up to the point when the pandemic hit, and that treatment has been paused for a long time because, obviously capacity was severely reduced and healthcare delivery organisations went into a rapid crisis response to the pandemic, certainly as it hit within the UK. Or it could be that one has decided to defer seeking help, and we know that people are doing that and have been doing that as the pandemic grew. That was a growing concern to clinicians that patients were not presenting with serious conditions, and then what we're seeing now is a swelling of patients seeking treatment and who are in need of intervention. So I'm going to show you a very quick video which sets the scene for this growing backlog of patients, and it sets the scene for some of the national figures around the scale of this challenge. And then I'm going to set it into context in terms of how within Morecambe Bay hospitals we've used data and analytics and AI to develop clinical-facing solutions that can help ensure that care is prioritised safely and with compassion.
So it's 8:30 in the evening. I'm now heading home after having a really busy day in the practice.
Nottingham GP Hussein Gandhi has been keeping a video diary for 5 News.
I'm not sure what else I can do to help this person. We've tried a variety of things.
Time after time, it's hospital treatment patients need.
We've just got to the limit. They need further support, and hopefully that will come at some point.
But time after time, they are trapped in the health service's huge backlog.
That's a real challenge for both us and for the patient because we're a bit stuck, really.
Figures out today show this picture mirrored right across England, with 4.95 million people on the waiting list to start hospital treatment at the end of March. 436,000 of them had been waiting more than 12 months. Amy has endometriosis and has been told she may well wait that long for surgery to ease her constant pain.
It's quite a struggle, to be honest with you. Not just physically, obviously, with the symptoms and everything else that I go through, but mentally as well, just not knowing when the surgery is going to be. And obviously it's a worry thinking that the condition is going to get worse the longer I wait.
To help catch up, the NHS is finding new ways to work. This was an office. Now it's a fast-track service diagnosing eye disease. And there's extra cash now to try out more time-saving ideas, like using artificial intelligence to decide which patients need priority and running one-stop-shop super clinics on Saturdays.
The scale of healthcare coronavirus recovery, as you just heard on the video, is really significant, and will certainly affect many of us and many of the people that we know. Looking at the first graph on this slide, this is showing an annual count of the patients waiting in England for routine operations and procedures. And you can see it's probably not unexpected. The right-hand side, that's the aggregate value for 2020-21. The latest data I extracted a few days ago showing just over 5 million people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure. And we could look at this data. Probably for me, it raises more questions than answers. Do we understand what's been happening over the past 10, 12 years? We've had a gradual increase in patients waiting for procedures since around 2010, 2011. What's the health policy that's behind that? What about the socioeconomic conditions? What about population growth? What about the case mix changes? Are people getting iller? Are people being referred for different conditions and so on? So, we expect it to be growing, and that's kind of in line with what's been happening over the past decade. However, what is really stark is when we look at patients who've been waiting over a year for treatment in England, and this again referenced in the video, there's been a huge jump. So just getting on for 500,000 patients have been waiting over a year for treatment now. We've seen the video, we understand why, but that represents a significant challenge. And don't forget, as we move forward and roll forward, we've got the continued demand for healthcare services, people requiring intervention surgically and medically, and continuing to increase. So this is a backlog we need to address. So I'll talk through some of the strategies we've used to better deliver healthcare, deliver healthcare opportunities, business moments within healthcare delivery organisations and populations they serve. But also I'm going to finish off with a real life example of a solution we built within ClickSense that leverages AI to deliver a clinical tool to be able to start to prioritise these patients, identify who's at most risk and who requires treatment most urgently. Of all the healthcare services, the one that gets the most political and media attention is urgent care. And emergency services are really under pressure globally. In the UK, over half of emergency departments within NHS trusts have been awarded a substandard rating by the healthcare regulator, the Care Quality Commission. And attendance levels and admission levels have been increasing and continue to increase. And although we see decreases in medical length of stay, so patients can be evidenced as staying for a shorter period of time within acute hospitals, we've also seen that there's been an increase in the volume of people who are being admitted, and this is placing real pressure on hospital beds. And I'd argue this has often been the case that there hasn't really been a true data-driven approach to understand the impact of this and how patients flow on a system-wide basis through the regions where healthcare is delivered. I think this really highlights the opportunity. We can use data and we can use analytics to transform the way health systems model the flow of patients, and we can hypothesis test how capacity, how workforce can best be optimised to safely meet demand and to do so in a sustainable way. We've done this at Morecambe Bay Hospitals in collaboration with the Catalyst team and with Click. We've developed an analytical command centre that has fundamentally changed the way the hospital is run to a situation right now where real-time and predictive analytics are driving clinical and operational decision-making 24/7. It's really transformed the way the health system's working. If I were asked to describe the blueprint for embedding predictive analytics into the heart of healthcare, I'd summarise it like this: lead, excite, innovate, disrupt, persist, and repeat. Lead with data. Be the one that stands up and makes things happen. Articulate ambitious vision, co-design a strategy with the organisation, with the subject matter experts, with the business leaders, with the clinical leaders, and implement a delivery plan. Exciting an organisation is really important, providing the wow, energising a business through engaging them in the formation of a strategy and delivering some really quick wins. By creating a culture of expectation, it's a really small step to securing emotional buy-in from the organisation and from the relevant stakeholders, and securing subsequent funding for investment in predictive analytics and data management. Innovate, understand what the problems are, and deliver some really successful proof of concepts and some successful solutions. And I think it's important here to remember that whilst we'd all love to have the next idea, next big idea, there's huge benefit in really picking off real life business problems and solving them through well thought through predictive solutions. So I guess, identify what's the business moment, what is the business trying to achieve, be it to, in healthcare, reduce the length of stay. A patient may stay in hospital, which has a positive effect for the patient and for the hospital in terms of cost, or it might be increasing revenue within a corporation. Identify what the opportunities are and design solutions around delivering them really quickly. Disrupt, this is the one I really like. Be prepared to be the person that challenges existing practice and offers new and unique solutions. Look for inefficiencies in practice and processes and build tools that can solve them. Keep asking why. Why is it done like this? Why has this process been followed for the past 2 years, 3 years? Why can't we rethink how we interact with this cohort of patients or customers or suppliers and so on? And be prepared to persist. I think, sometimes we forget that it's just sometimes really difficult, and changing culture and embedding innovation takes longer than we may want it to be. I think that's okay. And I've really learned that having a really clear vision, having an ambitious strategy and sticking to it, regardless of how hard it sometimes feels and how many hurdles we have to overcome, it will lead to results. It sometimes just takes time and longer than we want it to. And finally, repeat. Find the opportunities, build successful analytics and predictive analytics, implement them, and move on to the next one. Success invariably leads to success. I've talked about having a clear analytics and AI strategy, and here are the building blocks that I'd suggest are the most important for that. Firstly, identify your data repositories. Identify the sources of data that you need to be able to transform an organization, develop the solutions that will really have impact and change the way an organization both thinks and acts. Really important, particularly within industries such as healthcare and other ones, is around identifying the appropriate data sharing practices that need to be put in place. And really, these need to be identified early on, and the processes need to be addressed and frameworks implemented at the start of the process. Don't address data sharing, data protection issues at the end of the analytical development lifecycle. Identify them and put in place management to be able to address them early on in the process, and it just becomes a lot easier. Be really clear around what you want to do with data, how you process it, and who's impacted by that. Next is to implement the pipelining, so implement the data flow, ensure that data can flow and the technology is there to flow data between the data sources on the one hand and the analytical tools and the data engines which you want to be able to produce the solutions. So thinking about how data moves, having this idea of data's transient, is always moving, it is alive. It's really important to have the right technologies to be able to enable that. Next, build some really brilliant analytical solutions. So focus on the right apps, the right dashboards, which will have impact and will ensure that people buy into the strategy. On top of that, layering artificial intelligence, so autonomous machine learning, natural language processing, and so on. Look to augment analytics through a focus on predictives. Organizations now are, they're only interested in either what's happening now or what will happen in the future. At the time of looking historically at what happened last week, last month, last year, is becoming outdated. So layer on AI to drive forward, focusing on the future and changing the future. Next, really important to collaborate, identify key partners, key stakeholders to work with, share innovation, learn from each other, develop a culture of ideation, solution sharing, and that will lead to further success. And finally, doing all this will, from my experience, really help lift the culture of an organization and help to ensure that it's data-driven and that people have bought into the whole concept of using data to drive everything within an organization, to drive all decision-making. I'm going to now talk you through what I consider to be a really good analytical blueprint. So we've got a strategy. What data, what technology, what architecture do we want to ensure that we have so that we can deliver it, so that it's integrated, resilient, responsive, and flexible? And I strongly believe in cloud first. The maturity of cloud analytics and AI analytics has really happened. And it's the right architecture for implementing analytics that meet user requirements for ease of use, mobility, a frictionless user experience, and security, which is a really high importance, as I mentioned before, for healthcare. On the left of the screen here, I'm showing my data sources. So within the healthcare context, this could be acute data, data held within primary care, GP data, community services, social services, data sets, data from the third sector, could be from charities or third sector organizations, perhaps biometric data collected through the Internet of Things, and other associated cloud data sets. And what we want to be able to do is easily shift this data so that the data is held in these systems so that we can use it and add value to it. So we can drive action within our organizations. So the typical process we'd use is to ETL, extract, transform, load the data into a data warehouse. But thinking about harnessing the power of cloud analytics and cloud warehousing, we can flip that around, extract data, load it, and then look to transform it within our cloud architecture. I think that's a really important point. Thinking about elasticity of data storage and the opportunities that cloud data warehousing offers is really exciting. It changes the way we think about data. Next up, we want to then transform that data and load it into our analytical toolsets. So whatever our analytics and BI platform is, and then taking that, we can then deliver it to the business users. So that, and that's pretty standard. Obviously that fits in with what we do as business professionals. What becomes really interesting though is when we start to augment the analytics with things like in-app write-back, so allowing users to capture additional data information within an app, within a dashboard, write it back into the solution. And we also want our users to be able to interact with our data on a sort of more meaningful and granular level. So we can provide them links back into our cloud data platform. Next, we talked about AI and machine learning. So we want to ensure that we've got a connection between our analytics platform and our AI platforms. We want to have a two-way flow data delivered through that. And again, we've got a circular link back to our cloud data warehousing. And finally, if we do this right, if we really harness the power of analytics and machine learning and robotic process automation skills, we can really focus on things like hyper-automation. So we can start to influence people's decision-making in automated ways that we just couldn't do previously. And the cloud offers the ideal architecture for doing that. So I've got my blueprint, and what I wanted to do is then talk through the technologies that we've utilized at Morecambe Bay Hospitals with really great success. So we've taken a best of breed approach, and we've got some really exciting technologies that are at the cutting edge, the bleeding edge technologies that are really delivering significant value and changing the way a health system operates. So we've got our same architecture, we've got our data sets we talked about, and then we can use Qlik data integration to load that data into our data platforms within the cloud. We use Snowflake, and from Snowflake, we then transform that data into ClickSense SaaS. So we have a fully cloud-enabled pipeline of data flowing from our data sources straight to our users. Then through in-app write-back, we're using Infinity and that's been transformational in the way that we've pivoted from a service really focusing on analytics to a service focusing on workflow and delivering solutions that clinicians and operational staff are using every day as part of the care delivery process within the healthcare delivery organization. Again, we want our users to be able to interact with our data platforms properly, and we're using DataRobot to deliver autonomous machine learning, and we've been working with Qlik to look at exploiting the value and the potential of Blender to be able to provide a really intuitive, quick cloud-based link between our ClickSense SaaS and our DataRobot SaaS platforms. And again, by doing this, we really opened up the opportunities for taking analytics to the next stage to really focus on hyper-automation, to be able to not just predict what will happen in the future, but deliver solutions that will change the way that care is delivered in the future before it happens. And that's, as talked to, a really exciting prospect and will add significant value to patients and to staff as well. And really, it's all for me about really great leadership and taking an organization with you on a journey. If our vision is to enable data-driven decision-making at all transaction points within an organization, then we need to get everyone on board. And from my experience, people really love to be part of the journey. And our best successes have come through collaboration with the business, with the organization, and letting the business guide the development of analytical and predictive solutions. And click alerting, conversational analytics have been absolutely key in allowing us to reach members of staff that would have traditionally struggled to have been engaged through data. The pull of alerting is absolutely significant, and the opportunity to deliver that through ClickSense SaaS now, we're doing that with our analytical command center, and to be able to inform frontline staff that action is required has been significant. And it's actually played a really important part in the fight against coronavirus within Morecambe Bay hospitals. I'm not overselling the feedback from our clinical staff who have told us that patient lives have absolutely been saved. So every time a patient has been admitted into the hospital or moves location within the hospital and is identified as being COVID positive, our frontline staff, our bed managers, staff working within our command centre receive an alert, a click alert to alert them to who the patient is, where they are, and then actions immediately taken. Staff are moved away, and assessments made around staff safety in terms of PPE and the location of the patients looked at to ensure that they're in an appropriate place for their care. It really has changed the way the organisation has been able to safely handle and deliver care to patients who are very vulnerable and are also critically ill. And the result for us is that engagement's really up, app usage is up, and importantly, patient and staff safety, as I said, has been really improved. Speeding up the deployment time of generating predictive analytics sit alongside real-time analytics is a clear win, and a clear win for us in terms of how we've integrated ClickSense with DataRobot, because we've dramatically dropped the delivery time of building and deploying predictive models, and importantly, we've got a really tightly integrated platform. So sort of looking back at the blueprint I was talking through, we've got a tightly integrated platform that's keeping our predictive models in check in terms of accuracy, data drift, and relevance. And the tight integration, importantly, lets us create something tangible. That's predictive analytics within a ClickSense app for our clinicians and managers to interact with. And as I said, I'm going to talk you through a demo of an example of that, an app we've built, which leverages that technology over the past few weeks. And something which is really important, something that we all need to be really conscious of, is unintended bias. So while obviously it's important while we're designing and implementing analytical solutions in general, it's of really critical importance when we're designing predictive models that can be used to manage things like the way that patients receive treatment and care. It's really important to consider that. And we can implement strategies to mitigate the risk of bias, so we can avoid, we want to avoid black box AI. We want to be able to dive into model detail to check for discrimination. We want to look at things like feature impact, feature effects, and I'll show you this in the quick demo I'm going to show in a moment. We can check for indirect discrimination through checking model builds, checking that we're using training data that's representative of the behavior that we want our AI to learn. And so we can use functions such as alerting, then click alerting, and through ClickSense SaaS to warn us when our new data starts to look different to our training data. So it's really important. I think that's, it's worth just taking a lot of time to understand as we impact more with data, impact more in analytics, how we need to avoid bias and build in the check systems for us in our models. And something I'm really keen on promoting is a discussion around what's good enough with analytics, what's good enough to deliver those business moments through data. And in the context of how accurate do we need our predictive solutions to be so that we can add value. And as we've steered a healthcare organization along the augmented intelligence path, we've found this tendency for people to sometimes focus on an accuracy of a model in a negative context without thinking about what benefit it could bring. I think perhaps a good way of thinking about accuracy of predictive analytics is to ask questions about how this type of thing was done previously, how accurate was it, or whether there's an opportunity to improve upon that. Within healthcare, that could be asking questions about how clinical services are planned, or it could be asking questions about how patients at risk of developing a condition or at risk of being admitted to the hospital or at risk of dying could be identified. And again, I'm just about to show you a demonstration of how we've done that with great success. So this is a quick demo around how we've used, so going back to the video at the start, We've got a growing backlog of patients. You can see from the screenshot here, we've got just over 7,000 patients on a waiting list right now, waiting for treatment. And I'll talk you through the demo of how we built a ClickSense app that's integrating machine learning, modeling from DataRobot, and delivering it in a clinical-facing tool. So I can see here within my app, just over 7,000 patients waiting. I've got predictions for every patient for whether they'll be admitted and what the prediction is of dying over the next X amount of time. I can cut my data, I can explore my app looking at different specialties. I might want to look at particular procedures if I was a clinician, and I might want to look at patients who've already been identified as being a clinical priority or not. I'm just filtering now within my app to look at patients we're predicting are at greater than 75% risk of being admitted and have a greater than 10% chance of dying prior to treatment. I'm going to focus in on now on a service. So I want to, perhaps I'm a clinician and I'm a clinical lead, I work within trauma and orthopedics, so I'll pick the trauma and orthopedic service. I want to have a look at the procedures that patients are waiting for who we've identified at risk. So we filtered on patients who are at 75% risk of being admitted over the next 3 months. So I can see here, not surprising, the majority of those patients are waiting for a hip or a knee replacement. I want to focus on those. So they're the major procedures that I'm interested in. Looking at the bottom table, I can see my patient record view. I can perhaps filter on which patients are a high clinical priority. So 2 is high. I might want to look at how long patients have been waiting. So the top patient's been waiting for coming up to 2 years, and they're waiting for a knee replacement. And I can look at what features the model is predicting are influencing their risk score. So I'll just jump now into DataRobot. Remember, we're connecting through cloud analytics and the cloud analytics blueprints, technologies like DataRobot and ClickSense SaaS. So this is my model. So it's looking at predicting whether a patient will be admitted over the next 3 months, and we're feeding in data, waiting list data, so patients who are currently on the waiting list, and historical activity data as well, with information about patient, any conditions, etc. So now within DataRobot, I can explore my features, which dimensions are influencing the model to the greatest extent, and I can just check that they look okay, they look absolutely fine, and I can jump back into the app. And what we've done within here is then we've built a clinical view onto this app. We're working with clinical leads to use this to check through the waiting list, and I'll go filter on my patients at 75% risk of being admitted, we predict, and with a greater than 10% chance of dying over the next 6 months, that is. Again, I filter by trauma and orthopedics, as I did before. I'll have a look at the patients which are being brought up. So I can, I can sort these patients if I want to. I'm a clinician. I can check what they're waiting for. So, we talked about this before, knee replacements, hip replacements, we'd expect. We can look at the history as a clinician. So I can see this top patient's been within ED a couple of times over the past couple of years. And as a clinician, I can start to audit that. So we're doing this. So I'm identifying this patient has been reviewed. They should remain on the waiting list. I've updated our clinical electronic patient record. I've also been in contact with the GP, so I fed back this patient's been reviewed. They should be treated. I feel clinically that their quality of life will be enhanced through surgery, even though we're flagging them as a risk of potential risk of being admitted. And the patient's also been contacted. Communications have been implemented from the hospital to update the patients that their treatment is being prioritised. So I capture that text and save it, and then we've got a augmented record which is used clinically to be able to use AI, use analytics to be able to manage patients who are vulnerable and needing their prioritization of care reviewed. So to wrap it up, healthcare affects us all. It affects us personally and those around us. And I think we're in a really exciting place where the convergence of interconnected cloud data platforms has reached a level of maturity that allows us to derive real organizational value in rapid and tangible ways. And in terms of healthcare, as the globe continues to navigate away through the COVID-19 pandemic, data-driven healthcare delivery is an absolute essential component of the recovery and restoration process.